Welcome back to another episode of Filthy Hope. If it's your first time here, welcome. On this show, we spend time in the grey spaces where Jesus, life, and culture intersect. This is our 150th episode.
Woohoo! Do streamers and all of that in the post-sync, Jonty.
I'm Jonty, and I'm joined by Rev Ness, as always.
How are you, brother?
I'm good. I'm pretty exhausted. I think we're coming up into sort of roughly middle of the year. We're not even there yet, but you know, we've been past daylight savings.
Yeah.
So
Easter is always
dark.
a busy time for us too.
Yeah.
In the church.
Yeah. But you know, generally good. I'm feeling my illnesses have started to sort themselves out a little bit.
And you've got like a month till your wedding?
Yeah, less than now. It's getting close.
It's really exciting.
It's pretty exciting.
Yeah.
But yeah, I have been able to. I've had the respiratory ability to run for the first time since February.
Oh wow, that's a good sign.
So I was getting into. We've talked about wellness a whole bunch on this show. Getting into jogging again, and I was getting into really good rhythms and routine, and then I got I've recently found out way down the track now that I had whooping cough the whole time.
Yeah,
so,
wow.
That put a stop to anything more than like a slow walk. Basically, for me was
Pretty nasty illness.
yeah, it's pretty rough. But yeah, so I'm glad to kind of be putting a lot of that stuff hopefully behind me for now.
Yeah, excellent.
And put it to bed, especially before the wedding. I was just like, if I'm still sick by then, I'm going to be really annoyed.
And it's a stressful time, a wedding, and often brides and grooms do get crook in the lead up or post, you know, just from the sheer magnitude of what you're having to prepare and the emotional component of what you're doing and this lifelong commitment. There's a lot going on for you at the moment, and I think that occupies your psyche in ways that you're not even aware of.
Yeah,
deeply.
It's pretty all-encompassing at the moment.
Yeah, you're going to be a husband in a minute, mate.
Yeah.
Not just Jonty, you're going to be Jonty and Claire.
I have a pretty sweet ring to show off as well.
Yeah, and you got a sweet wife.
She doesn't listen.
It's good.
How about you? How are things going for you at the moment now?
Yeah, I'm okay. I feel like I've also had a bit of a rough first quarter with illness and stuff, but I'm doing okay. So I start to feel great back at the gym, back to doing all my Pilates and all my stuff that I do, and off the meds and losing weight and feeling a whole lot better. And then I decide I'm going to go and have a flu shot. Talk about sabotage feeling okay.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, and I feel cheeky for even complaining about the feeling of fatigue and what I'm feeling.
Yeah.
But because it's such a blessing to be able to have a flu shot, right? And to be preventing potential flu into the winter months. But it does make you feel like crap for 24 hours or so, doesn't it?
Yeah. I remember the feeling of the COVID shots as well.
Oh.
Like they just wipe you out for some people for like a week.
Yeah.
Mine weren't that. My experience wasn't that bad, but yeah, like 2 or 3 days of just feeling really, really crook. And when you get like at the earlier this year, I did some travel in January, and you get your travel shots. When you go through different parts of the world.
Did you do malaria?
I don't think. I think I've already.
Were tablets.
No, we didn't have to do malaria.
Tetanus,
Hep B, I think it was.
Yes.
Yeah, knocked me out for
I had to do that at Borneo
48 hours.
Trip. Oh, horrible.
Yeah. And like you get that,
Arm
that
ache.
horrible. Yeah, and the lymph node under the armpit just swells up and
Chills.
gets
It's gross.
Yeah, horrible. When this comes out though, we've at time of recording 2 days ago now, we're still riding the high from that live show we just had with Allie Robinson.
How great was she?
Phenomenal. Yeah, I think just thinking ahead, if not already soon, there'll be some audio and some clips coming out from that show as well. So if you weren't able to make it in person, keep an eye out for those. She's phenomenal. Yeah.
Such a generous, hilarious guest.
Yeah.
And so intelligent and warm and just a normal, brainy, geeky. She didn't want to be known as a theologian, biblical scholar.
Yeah.
She went with, didn't she?
Yeah, and very specific to New Testament.
Yes, and
scholarship.
I just was fangirling her. Like she knew all the bits. She, you know how I have like number dyslexia and don't know where anything is in the Bible. I have to use Siri for the numbers. And she just knew. She'd say, John 14, that's verse, 6 to 11. I'm going, oh, bitch, you're a machine.
But it's a combination of like that really specific knowledge recall mixed with a communication style that's very conversational, and you don't feel like you're being talked down to.
No, or lectured.
Yeah, it's a very, very, very accessible in how she talks about the stuff that she's incredibly knowledgeable about.
So the person we're talking about, for anybody that's listening that doesn't know, is Dr. Allie Robinson, and she's a New Testament biblical scholar and lecturer at the United Theological College in North Parramatta, where a lot of our Uniting Church ministers go to. I call it monk school. Yeah, that's where we learn to be revs.
Yeah.
Or lay revs or whatever revs we want to be.
Yeah.
Pastors, the whole shebang.
Yeah, she was a fantastic guest. That was show number 2 for the year. We are going to be doing some more live shows as this year goes on as well.
Live show number 2.
Yeah. So we've had that show. We had the one at Taramara in February with Will Small. If you weren't there, there's clips and audio up from that as well. So if you weren't able to catch that one, check that one out as well. We're planning to squeeze at least 3 more in this year.
Excellent.
And we're in the middle of planning who those guests are going to be and where they're going to be. So
if anybody's got any suggestions for a guest or has a lure or a connection with some spicy guest that you'd like to hear on our show, please reach out to us. We would love that connection. That'd be fun.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Who would you dream of having on here, Jonty?
For the live show or just in...
for live.
For a live show. Ooh.
So they've got to be alive.
Yeah, we're not going to perform a seance.
No, mate. We're not conjuring up.
Speak with Bonhoeffer or something. No. Great question. I'd love to speak to... In a live show, I reckon Nadia Boltz-Weber would crush.
Yeah, I fangirl her too. Yeah,
we've reached out to her a couple of times to have her just on the regular podcast, and she's obviously much busier and much more renowned than we are. I think she would bring a pretty epic energy to a live show.
100%.
I don't know. What about you? I'll throw in another one. There's a number of comedians who talk about faith in a really interesting way that I think having a comedian at a live show would just be a hell of a lot of fun. Yeah.
I would love, is there anybody that's a comedian that's a Christian that does a Christian comedy set? That's somebody I'd love to have on the show. That'd be fun.
So when we had Will Small at Taramara, we let him perform poetry for 20 minutes. If we had a comic just giving them half an hour to do stand-up,
I'm thinking
would be phenomenal. Yeah.
I'm thinking, what is that musical theatre show that is the Book of Mormon? I'm thinking Book of Mormon-esque. Somebody to come and absolutely have us in hysterics so we can laugh at ourselves.
Do you remember Pirate Church?
I do.
Maybe we should reach out to those guys.
That's a great idea.
So I've met them before, and Dad also grew up in Perth, which is where I'm not going to dox anyone, but there's connections.
Okay.
Is all I'll say. So that's probably would be easier than a few other guests.
I think that would just be super fun.
I'll put a little pin in that.
Thank you.
Check this space. We might follow that one up at some point. I hadn't thought of that. That's a good idea. The Pirate Church guys. Yeah.
Just want to have a laugh.
Yeah.
Be so good.
So we are going into Holy Week.
Yeah.
In fact, when this comes out, it is Holy Week.
Yeah. So it's Tuesday of Holy Week.
That's right.
And so Sunday, just the Sunday that we've just had, was actually we celebrated the triumphant entry of Jesus into Jerusalem. And the other name for that would be Palm Sunday, where they waved all the palms and
had clothes down.
Yeah, big celebration. You know the donkey story?
Yep.
And he gets the donkey and trots on into town and Hosanna, Hosanna, na 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 na. Maybe you could replace me and you could put Jesus Christ Superstar in there.
Sure.
I think that'd be cool.
We definitely won't get copyright strike if we do.
I forget about that every time.
Yeah.
And I was singing so poorly, you'd never pick it up anyway. You'd never know what that was.
I'll add some music underneath you.
Yeah, there we go. Lovely. Thanks, Jonty.
Yeah.
No, so Palm Sunday's just happened. He's rocked into Jerusalem. He's rocking in for Passover. All his mates are coming into town. It's a big deal. And so I think this week he probably throws the tables over, chucks the tables in the temple, gets the shits with all the people and the money changers and angry. And he knows he's going to go to
Golgotha.
He knows he's going. And so can you imagine the agitation that he must be feeling about that and the people not recognising who he knows he is? You know?
Yeah, and even when he does, like his closest disciples, when he says to them, like, just a heads up, the Son of Man was born to die, but chill. That has to happen so that the Son of Man can be risen from the dead. I'm paraphrasing, obviously.
Yeah,
and even when he explicitly tells them that, they're like, huh?
What the?
I don't get it. What do you mean?
I know.
So even can you imagine how lonely that must be?
For him?
For him,
Oh,
yeah.
super lonely. And then he goes to Passover and they do the big, this is where communion comes from, right? So he breaks the bread and he does the wine and he says, do this in remembrance of me. This is my body broken and this is my, the blood, the juice, the wine is representative of my blood that's going to be spilled. I reckon they were sitting there at that dinner party going, what?
Well, and I think
What is he on?
talked about this before. He's taking what they were there to celebrate anyway, which is a Jewish tradition that goes back thousands of years again from there, and he's recontextualizing it with his own
Body.
presence and body. And so it's not even just that he's suddenly talking about eating his body and drinking his blood.
No,
He's doing
that's
that
right.
while kind of changing and twisting a tradition that they're all really familiar with. So it's like double is shocking and what on earth is he doing?
Yeah, that's right. Incredible. And talk about lonely. And then one of his besties, Judas, betrays him at that dinner party.
Depending which gospel you read.
Right.
Might have been possessed by the devil.
Maybe.
Depending which gospel you read.
That's right.
Maybe he just got bought out by the Romans and he was greedy.
Yeah, we just love the mystery of all that.
Yeah.
It's so good, different perspectives. And
Again, listen to that live show if you want some. If you want some more
she
about
was great, wasn't she?
the conflict and difference between the four gospels. Yeah.
And so talk about lonely, like he knows his mate's going to betray him, or he knows his mate, the devil's going to occupy him, whatever gospel you're leaning into.
Yeah.
And needless to say, it's all wouldn't feel too great. And then Judas pisses off, and then Jesus trots out with the leftovers after the big meal and says, "Hey dudes, it's not going to end well shortly, and can you just watch by while I go and pray?" Talk about lonely, mate. They doze off.
Yeah.
They go to sleep, mate. On his last night. Surely if they'd known, they wouldn't have gone to sleep, and they would have been up like little meerkats watching out for these soldiers coming in. Or maybe they just didn't know that anybody was coming to get Jesus at that time. I don't know. It's just lonely.
Yeah, and that loneliness, carries all the way through to Good Friday.
Yeah. So
we don't have to go into heaps of detail because it's a story that, as Christians we hear every year, but obviously with being handed over and interrogated and doubling down and going, no, I am the Son of God.
Yep.
And then go, right, guilty, all the way through to getting beaten, stripped, whipped. Again, if you've seen the Passion of the Christ, you've seen a fairly accurate, with a few asterisks on there, representation of what that might have been like, to then getting crucified, which it's one of those, I don't know if you've seen the meme about asking dudes how often you think about the Roman Empire.
I haven't seen that.
Okay, I don't have time to explain why that's a thing, but yeah, it's like it's just an internet thing where stereotypically guys are always at some level just pondering the Roman Empire.
Because they're cool, they're strong.
Yeah, it's cool piece of history.
Yeah.
Yeah. But So
my husband talks about the Roman Empire.
See, there you go. There you go.
Yes.
It's a thing. Yeah. But the Romans knew how to execute people.
Oh, yeah.
Like they had it down pat.
Oh, a fierce army.
Yeah. And
Famous.
So not a nice way to go.
No.
But so we talk about this every year and it's on the calendar.
Yeah.
It moves around obviously with the
Moon.
positioning of the moon. And we can talk a little bit more about the top level stuff. In fact, I would encourage you to join Into the Word tomorrow where we dive into some more of this about the nuts and bolts of Easter. But for this particular show, and we're on our 150th episode, so it's a bit of a, milestone occasion. I like to go dig a little bit deeper into some of the more personal stuff. Why do we celebrate Easter and why is it important to us? And more specifically, Ness and Jonty.
Yeah, right.
Why is Easter important to you? Why is the really grim, graphic
Great question.
crucifixion of some guy that lived 2,000 years ago?
Yeah.
Why is that something that we celebrate specifically for us?
I think when I was thinking about this question, I think it's all to do, for me personally, it's about the suffering. And I remember having an aha moment in my own recovery and survival and understanding more about me and my history as a kid, which wasn't grand. Parts of it. Lots of my childhood was great, but I have a specific period that was really ugly that happened at Easter. And I think about Jesus suffered. And when I was going through my recovery and understanding about my life, I had to come to terms with the fact that, and I asked the question, where was God? Where was God in that? If God was so great and God was so loving and all-powerful, why did this happen to me as a 6.5-year-old? Can't be a very bloody good God if he allows that kind of suffering to happen to a little kid. And I had to wrestle with that. And it's not been long since I've had the revelation that I've actually discovered that God was with me in that. God never left me nor forsake me. Do you say forsook?
Forsaked.
Forsaked, is it? Yeah. He didn't do a runner on me at all. And he was there every step of the way with me, holding my hand while I was being abused. So then when I look at Easter, so if I look at my own suffering through that lens, I then come to Easter and I get to be involved in the worship and the recounting of the Passion narrative and hearing of Jesus' own suffering. What it does for me is it just gives me a sense of he did this for me. And so I feel a sense of, well, I hate the thought of the graphics of what happened to him, but the power behind why he did what he did just undergirds how I think and feel about him today. Yeah, and the power of all of that.
Yeah. Great answer.
He suffered. And it's not just me, like he suffered. He suffers with all of us when we suffer. He suffers when anybody's in pain. God is there. He loves us. And he's suffering alongside us, with us in the moment.
Yeah.
With us. That's big shit, Jonty. That's like huge. If that's not a sales pitch for Jesus Christ, I don't know what is, mate. Throw in the steak knives. He suffered. And then the whole resurrection piece. Holy dooly, man. That just gives me goosebumps. The whole resurrected, nail-pierced hands. Like he suffered. We see him resurrected into new life on the Sunday and his hands still have the scars of the pain. And that makes me feel okay about my scars. Makes me feel while they have healed, they are still scars there. It's got to rub the vitamin E oil into them. Do you know what I mean? I just think he's got the scars too. And he was resurrected. I think it's such a filthy hope message.
Yeah.
It's so filthy. It's the filthiest of filth. And yet the whole death and resurrection piece just reeks hope. I could do a sermon on that.
Yeah, lock it in.
Yeah.
Do you want to hear Ness preach on Easter Sunday?
I reckon that could be the sermon.
Yeah. I've been thinking a lot recently about, and this will come around, but I have this real sense that my life, but the lives of most people, is becoming more and more fragmented and more pulled in all sorts of different directions. And we struggle with, and this is probably a symptom of the way that information and communication happens.
Yep.
Is we're in the
21st century.
21st century with
online.
The speed of communication and the rate of
yes.
information transfer is so fast, so much faster than we can comprehend. So it's a pretty common thing that I hear people talking about is like, I just feel like I don't have time to like do nothing and just like unplug and relax. I feel like I'm always busy. I'm always pulled in. I have 10 different things that I have to do today and I got none of them done.
Yep.
I think one of the really strong magnetic things about the Easter story for me is that it's like a single event that is still sending ripples through history in all directions. And one of the reasons why I think, and this we're probably going to talk about this again on the show at some point, but this idea, in fact, we talked about it last week actually, this idea that church still has a place is that it's something that you can revolve your life around, that it's a constant, that isn't fragmented, that isn't shooting in 30,000 different directions at all times. And the Easter story at the center of it, the death and resurrection of Jesus, is like the ultimate like magnetic force at the center of, that you can place at the center of your life that isn't going to change, that everything else will rotate around. More and more I find that to be a really attractive thing in terms of, not in a theological sense, but in a how I want to orient my life sense. So aside from all the wonderful theological and faith-based stuff that I'd love to talk about too, something that I'm reflecting on particularly this year is like, what else would you rather rotate your life around than the Son of God dying and resurrecting? Like, and following the teaching of the most influential person in human history as a way of like anchoring yourself in a world that seems to be pulling you in all different directions and feels like it's going to tear you apart.
Sounds like you need to do a period of discernment. No, just saying. It's
not happening. Sorry, people listening. Give me an option that isn't to be a minister and then we'll talk.
Oh, yes. Well, I can see that there's going to be a clip in years to come where we just play that again, where you say what you just said and that clip's going to come up and we're all going to piss ourselves laughing.
Yeah. I just can't. There's plenty of other ways to preach the gospel that isn't as an ordained minister. But
and you're doing it right now.
Yeah, exactly.
I was just being funny.
Yeah. On this, the first question that we're going to get to today, and we've got a bunch that we can get through, while we're talking about Easter, one of the questions that was sent in from our listeners in our community group, so if you're not in there and you want to be a part of that, the link's down below. We have a group on Facebook where we talk to our listeners. Abby asks us, how would you answer the question, why did Jesus die for preschool children? She tried to do it several times this morning, but would be keen to hear your responses leading up to Easter. So I'm not sure about preschool. I mean, you've had kids that have gone through that age, but you're also a scripture teacher.
Yeah, I taught scripture this morning and we did the Easter story.
Yep.
And I started first of all with the come to me like little children passage first, set it up that way. And then I asked them, we're coming into Easter and they said, yes. I said, what does Easter mean to you? And they said, bunnies, chocolate eggs, going overseas, holidays, no school. And this was year 1 to 2. and 23 of them.
For international listeners, that's roughly age 5,
5
6,
and
7?
6. Yeah, 5, 6. Yeah.
Yeah, around there.
Yeah. And, 5, 6, 7. You're right.
So you what do you say, year 1, year 2?
Year 1, year 2.
Yeah. So
yes, it's 6 and 7.
some of them might even be age
I don't
7.
think, no, they're still really little.
Yeah.
Anyway, I said to them, we're going to talk about Easter. And they said bunnies, eggs and all those things. And I said, does anybody remember a famous guy at Easter time? And one little kid put his hand up and he said, yes, it's Jesus' birthday.
Pretty shocker of a birthday.
Yeah, and then another little girl said, no, it's not, Remy. It's not his birthday. It's when he died. And I thought, oh, that's so fascinating, just watching them correct each other. And I said, well, what do you know about Easter and Jesus dying? And then that same little girl said, well, he died, but the best part is he came alive again. And I said, wow. And then other kids were prompted by that. And so I was curious to flesh out what they knew before I launched into what I was going to tell them. And they fleshed it out that he died, and another little kid said he was on a cross. Another little kid said he went in a rock. He was put into a rock, and then an angel came. So they had, between 23 of them, they had sections of the story that they knew
picked up.
Yeah, it was really cute actually. And then I said to them, you guys, I must have the smart class, because look at you go. You are so switched on to know all that information about Jesus and his death and resurrection. And so then I used some really good media, and I love to lean on Saddleback Kids Church. They do this, they're called the Uh-Oh Guys, and they do a really great Easter narrative that's not gruesome, it's really age appropriate, and it's a gentle storytelling, and the kids love it. They love it. So I shared that a couple of clips with them on that. And I didn't get asked like the person is asking us about why Jesus died, but I got, how did he come alive again? That was the big question. They seemed to be okay with he died, because they wanted to know about the nails in his hands.
Yep.
And in the Saddleback video, they showed Jesus with these holes in his hands and in his feet. It's really excellent. And so the kids knew straight away, oh, that's how he died, with nails in his hands and his feet. So they didn't ask me any more about that. So I just be led by them. And there's only so far in that age group that I can go.
Yeah.
And the question about how did he come alive again? And then what I do with that is I say, how do you think he came alive again? I put it straight back to them. And a little boy said, well, the angel came and the angel made him come back alive again. And I just sat with that for a bit. And then somebody else said, God made him come back alive again. I just sat with that. I said, what do you all think? And they said, that's it. That's how it happened. I said, yeah, amazing. And I then showed them another little clip of a part of the 40 days after on the road to Emmaus, when Jesus rocks up with the two blokes and they're having a yak, and then they realise, it's Jesus. And the kids piss themselves laughing. They didn't even, look, Rev, they didn't even know it was him, because he was alive again. And we unpacked a little bit about that. So to those little ones, the question is about why did he die? I haven't actually been asked that question.
Just hearing you reflect and retell, it's like that's a very subtext question to be asking at an age where they're usually just talking about text. I haven't taught kids that age. I'm not a teacher. And so I'm sure people listening who teach kids that age, like primary school teachers or tutors or whatever, all probably have lots of really good knowledge and learning on how best to communicate big, scary concepts to kids that age.
I'd probably say, Jonty, because he loves us that much. He loves us that much that he would die for us.
Yeah, I've just finished rewatching the first season of The Last of Us.
Oh.
Because season 2 is about to start. When this comes out, episode 1 will have already come out. And the central conceit of it, or one of the central things, is this idea that, skip ahead 2 minutes if you don't want season 1 of The Last of Us spoiled for you, but as soon as Joel, who has healed in the wound of losing his daughter, has been healed by taking on this new person as a daughter figure in his life, and has healed that wound for him. Once he realizes, and she's immune to the worldwide infection, once he realizes, after this long journey of taking her across the country to hopefully find a cure for humanity, that the surgery will require them to kill Ellie to get because the fungus is attached in the brainstem and blah, blah, blah. He's like, nope, forget about it, find someone else. And so he commits a horrendous act of breaking in and killing all the doctors and saving Ellie. The central concept of, if we take for granted that a parent's love transcends everything else, like you just unconditionally love your child, the logical extreme of that is you prioritize the life of your child over the life of the rest of the human population. And depending who you ask, if you ask a parent, did Joel do the right thing? Absolutely, he did the right thing. But if you ask someone else who maybe isn't a parent, it's a bit more 50-50 of like, did Joel do the right thing? And so through stories, we can get this idea of like trading in people's lives as if they hold more or less weight than one or the other. Whereas when we see the life of Jesus being given up willingly for the price of the whole of the human population, in the reverse of something like The Last of Us, instead of damning or resulting in the non-vaccine, it's the opposite. He's giving up his life to the benefit of humanity. I think the stories is the easiest way to do it with kids. I've certainly 100%. Found, even with adults, like we can access big ideas like that through story.
Yeah.
And so something like The Last of Us, you go, wow, I didn't think I'd be thinking as a 27 to almost 27-year-old who isn't even married yet. All of a sudden I'm thinking about what parenthood means to me, and the price or the value that I would place on my child over, like, fuck everyone else, my kid is the most important thing on the planet.
You would do that.
Like that's the power that stories have to make us actually start to engage with those big concepts. And so my small contribution to this topic of how we talk to kids about why Jesus had to die is there's a great story that you can tell. You don't necessarily have to be like, and this is why.
No, that's right.
You can just tell the story, and the story tells the why in the telling of the story.
And with children, they're so wonderful at being able to access curiosity.
Yes.
Just let them come up with the answer. You know, and I'll always end a class by saying, I'm curious to know, what was your favourite part? I'm curious to know, how did you feel about that? You know, and they love it when you're curious to know
and
about
why?
What they think.
Why is it your favourite part?
Yeah, it's excellent.
Yeah.
So cool. So we don't always have to have the answer. I think that's really important with certainly teaching children, and also about the Bible and the Jesus story. We don't have to always know why, because there's a lot of it people make up the why.
Yeah.
And then I think, why did you feel that you had to make that shit up? Can't you just sit in the grey? Can't you just sit in the mystery? You don't have to reduce the facts of Jesus to yes or a no, a black or a white. It could sit in this space here, and don't get your knickers in a knot, brother.
Yeah. There are a bunch of like...
I still want to say that in an essay.
I'd love to say that. But like, if you want, there are all these different like theories of atonement and substitutionary penal, blah 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 blah. So you can go into that stuff if you want. And there's all different explanations for why and how. But for a 6-year-old, like, who cares? Tell the story. Like,
for a 26-year-old,
the story tells the why. Like, if you let the story breathe and actually, without putting your own interpretation on the story, this is something that Allie actually talked a bit about at the live show. Like, we're so prone to putting our own stuff on top of the story without realizing, and just letting the story speak for what it is. Often, and with something as rich as scripture, and like the passion story has it's so dramatically imperfect in terms of like, it's not how you teach a student to write a good story, but that's where its power comes in, because it's a complete subversion of how you would often talk about good storytelling, because it is a subversion of so many cultural and religious ideas that know that the hero, quote unquote, isn't going to ride in on horseback and slaughter the Romans.
I know.
Is going to willingly give himself up.
Yeah. Up until the Friday, it's such a shit story. It really is like dodgy. It's not going to be a blockbuster if it ended there. Like Jesus Christ Superstar, the theatrical production, I'm sure I've talked about that on the show. You know, it's like it just ends at the death. And that would have been a powerhouse of a show if they'd done a part 2.
It's like, remember the way Avengers Infinity War ends?
Oh, I can't remember.
So that's, again, spoilers for a movie that's probably almost 10 years old now, but Thanos gets all the stones and snaps half of the world out of existence, and then the movie just ends.
Oh, I don't remember that one.
And you have to wait a year until Endgame comes out for them to
go
through
remember.
time. And
yes, that's right.
Yeah.
I kind of lost the thread of it, Marvel.
Yeah, once it spread to TV, it's too much for me to keep track of.
I couldn't, I used to get frustrated with unable to link it all together. So I kind of ditched it. But I was such an avid fan there for a long time. What else have we got, brother?
This is a great question from James, who says, first of all, congrats on 150 episodes.
Thanks, James.
Congrats, Ness. Question for you. Over 150 episodes, you've covered so much. Are there any episodes or topics that you wish you hadn't done or wish that you could have done different? And also, are there any topics that you'd love to cover but haven't got a chance to yet?
Oh, my gosh, James, I can't begin to tell you how many nights I've laid in bed and rethought over things that I've said just loosely with my lips and burst into tears and texted Jonty, you're going to have to don't post that bit or remove that section. Jonty, please, we can't have that section in there. I shouldn't have said that little piece. And don't worry,
often
Ness.
After it's already come out.
Oh, my God. So many times, James. Yes. And things that, and a good podcast, I think, is a podcast that allows for the speakers, the hosts and the guests to be vulnerable, to talk about their own lives, right? So we both vulnerably talk about our own lives, and we're just not individual people in our own lives. They involve other people in our lives. And I will frequently talk about things that have happened in my life that involve people that I love and care for deeply. And at times I've used examples from my life and I haven't mentioned who they are, and I've been really careful to not give an identity away. Boy, they get upset. Really upset with me. And I think if I was to regret, it would be moments like that when somebody has been really mortified by something that I've said. Not that the world knows who they are. I think I wish I hadn't done that. So I've got to be really careful, James, when you're doing that kind of thing, to really be, just careful, mindful. Yeah,
and I think because we've been doing it for coming up on 3 years now, both of us have changed so much that like I don't go back and listen to old episodes, but I think about some of the conversations I'm sure we've had over the 3 years that I probably think differently now. Yeah, I can't think of a specific example just off the top of my head, but like I'm sure there are things that I've said on the show that I said with absolute sincerity and confidence that I'd listen to now and go, no, that's not it. That's not how I feel today.
I'll test that theory.
Yeah.
How do you feel about people cutting in on you on a when you're driving?
Do you want the real answer?
Have you changed?
I was taking the piss a bit, but yeah. It annoys me, but like you just let him in. Who cares?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. It's yeah. There's lots of interest. Like someone said something really interesting to me, and it wasn't a criticism. It was actually like it was the opposite. They were like, "Oh wow, Jonty, more and more I'm discovering you're more conservative than I thought you were."
Yeah, I would say that about you too. You're freaking me out, man. You really
And
are.
I wouldn't at all call myself, like if I were just to place myself arbitrarily on some sort of spectrum of progressive and conservative, it'd probably be closer to the progressive side than the conservative side. But I think, yeah, probably compared to where I was 3 years ago, I have probably slid further in the other direction.
I think you are quite conservative, actually. I really do.
In a lot of ways. But in a lot of ways, I would be considered a heretic by conservative culture.
Yeah, you would. Yeah, that's exactly right.
So it's
You're a cool
caught in the
conservative.
middle somewhere. Yeah. I'm trying to think. I'm sorry, James. I can't think of any specific topics that I wish we could have done differently. I think we probably mishandled. I don't know if you remember. We interviewed Alan and Leo from. They were your tour guides.
Yes.
In Israel. We interviewed them and aired an episode like on the week of the 6th of October.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Without probably sitting on it as long as we should have. I remember we had lots of long conversations about when's the right time to release this episode? Should we release this episode? Is it in... Because, you know, I other than the Zoom call that you did with them and editing that conversation, I've had no contact with either of those two, but you know them personally. And so it was never any question of doubting or having any, you know, like it wasn't a question of do we trust these people as representatives of any particular culture or identity or
They were just sharing
ideology. They were just sharing their story. Yeah, that's right.
That's
and
it.
so
and we just empathised with people hurting, sharing a story.
yeah.
It becomes sensitive, I suppose, because it's Israel.
Yeah.
It's Jerusalem.
And we
you know?
copped a bit of heat for releasing that episode, which I totally understand why. I totally understand why. But also we copped a lot of heat from people that hadn't actually heard the episode. So kind of, you know.
I thought it was pretty brave of us on the flip side to jump on that. I'd only been back from Israel 10 days and that happened, the event happened. And so I was still in touch with that guide, Leo, and I just thought what a great opportunity to hear about what's going on there, to filter through what we're hearing on the news, what's fake, what's real, and let's hear it from somebody on the ground.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, what we talked about, was it any less sensitive than what you'd hear on the news? I don't think so. We're just listening to people's truth about what was going on for them at the time and from their perspective. And just sharing that, I suppose.
Yeah.
I'm sorry if that upset people. But we always have a choice to tune out, change stations.
Yeah, podcasts, you opt into them. So, yeah.
You can just opt out if you're hearing something that you don't like the sound of.
Yeah.
I do it all the time on the radio.
I still wrestle with that. And at the same time, I'm like, it's one episode of a podcast that like maybe 300 people listen to. Like, it's not a big deal. But I want like.
But you never want to offend anybody or upset people.
Not intentionally.
No, that's right.
You want to do everything in good faith and with the right intention.
Yeah, and I like to think that's where we come from. We get passionate and excited, and we can be loose lips at times. But I think we're just being raw and real.
Yeah,
and that's all a part of Filthy Hope. It's a radical, honest ministry, really.
Yeah.
And conversations.
I think one topic that I would like to cover, and now's probably a decent time to cover it, so at some point in the near future we'll probably look at doing this, is, and we've talked about this in the past, we just haven't ever gotten around to it, is a conversation around gender identity isn't the right term, but around culture of masculinity and femininity.
Great.
And especially given at the moment adolescence is huge on Netflix. don't know if you've seen Adolescence yet.
No,
it's
I
a
haven't.
four-part miniseries, and is addressing this topic pretty explicitly. And I'm quite passionate about it. Obviously, being of the demographic that I am, that there is this real thing that young boys and young men are looking for guidance, and there are some very, very strong voices that are providing, rightly or wrongly, guidance that people are latching onto that has some pretty harmful effects. I'm thinking of you, Andrew Tate's, of that ilk.
Love to talk about that.
I think that's a really valuable and worthwhile conversation. It's obviously something we want to do the right way, and I'd actually also want to balance it out with, if we're going to spend an episode talking about good, strong, faith-based, biblical masculinity in a healthy, additive, not subtractive way, we should do the same about femininity and in between, So I think I'm going to be thinking long and hard about what the best way to approach that is. And
you tell me I've got to cover my hair or grow my hair, I'm going to punch you in the face.
I think that's fair enough. I think that's absolutely fair enough. Shouldn't be telling you what to do in any setting.
Oh, yes, that's sweet.
I think, and if listeners, if that's something that you'd be interested to hear our take on, then let us know, and we'll fast track.
Getting the right guests on for that will be really imperative.
That's crucial. Getting the right expert.
Yeah, I agree.
And maybe we'll start with a psych would be good. Yeah, we could start by just looking at the Netflix show Adolescence.
Yeah, I think that's great
as a starting point, and then depending how we go, we'll get some experts in and
great
have a chat about that.
That's exciting.
It's a good question, James, and there's plenty of other topics that.
Yeah, thanks, James. James, another topic I'm really passionate about. Funny that it's coming out of Netflix. I'm just up to episode 5 of Love on the Spectrum, and I would love to unpack more about that. I sat with my family on Saturday night watching a couple of episodes together, and the joy that we all collectively felt. It is just so innocent and beautiful and peaceful, and I just had a smile on my face that ached at the end of a couple of episodes because it was so stunning, that show. And I'm feeling sad. I've only got one episode to go, and then it's over. I don't get it again for another year if they roll it again. But I think it's just been absolutely fantastic. So I would love for us to have a conversation about that and bring in some experts to talk about.
That'd be fascinating.
On the spectrum. Yeah,
absolutely.
Life on the spectrum, the world from a spectrum.
I know a past guest of the show, Catherine, was when we spoke to her on the show, was about to embark on some research around neurodiversity and access in the church.
She was awesome.
So maybe
that was a good interview.
We'll pull her back in, and
great.
Depending on whether or not that research is finished, and whether she's got some more stuff that she can talk to us about neurodivergency and being on the spectrum and how you engage in church and faith. That'd be really interesting as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're two good ones up our sleeve already.
Yeah, I think.
Love that.
And there's so many other things.
Of course.
we've got plenty in the bank. Will, worth shouting out Will and Amanda, who were at the show from Geelong.
We had international guests fly up.
Well, not quite, unless Geelong is international.
Well,
they weren't from Tasmania.
No, they came from Tassie. No, Geelong, that's right. They drove up. It was so lovely to have them come and join us.
Will asks us, is there a necessary evil? This is a really interesting question, and that's all there is to the question in terms of how it's phrased. The first thing that jumped to mind for me is there's this trope in storytelling called the noble lie. Famously something like The Dark Knight, so the Batman film with Heath Ledger's Joker. Yep. At the end of that film, Batman decides to lie and tell the public that he killed all the people and takes the fall for all of Harvey Dent's crimes, so that the image of who Harvey Dent was is preserved, and Batman becomes the Dark Knight, becomes the pariah, becomes the scapegoat for everything to preserve the soul of Gotham. So that then becomes a noble lie. It's not the truth. It's a you're deciding to tell a lie, but it's for the sake of holding together a common good. So Christopher Nolan does a lot of those. Like, I don't know if you've seen Memento with Guy Pearce. It's one of his earlier ones.
No.
It's a story of a guy who can't generate new memories. And it's really interesting. It's told chronologically backwards because he can't generate new memories. And by the end of the time by the time you get to the end of Memento, the character decides to lie to himself to preserve a sense of meaning in his life.
Oh, okay.
So a noble lie. So there's this idea that
it's a lie and then a lie.
It's a lie that preserves something. I don't know if this is answering this question of a necessary evil, but do you have any thoughts on this, Ness?
I've just been reading Julia Quinn, and she's the author of the Bridgerton series.
Books, yeah.
And I've been reading this one called How to Catch a Marquis. And I think his story, James is his name, James lies about his identity of being a marquis, so of being of noble family, to lure this beautiful girl who's not of nobility, and he falls in love with her, and she falls in love with him, but she thinks he's just the groundskeeper.
Right.
And he changes his name to Mr. Siddons. And so he's told this lie because his aunt is a countess and she is being swindled or blackmailed. And so she asks him to come in and set up a ruse to find out who this person is that is blackmailing her. And so that's like a noble lie. But he builds this relationship with her and falls in love with her, and then she finds out though and all shit breaks loose. And I'm up to the part where the shit's broken loose, but they're in love and then she can't trust him. So I don't know how it ends. But is that a noble lie?
I don't know it well enough, but it's ringing similar bells. Yeah.
For the sake of the good of catching the baddie.
Yeah, and when the lie is revealed to be a lie.
Yeah.
How that completely crumbles
It crumbles.
So like, if you remember, in The Dark Knight Rises, Gary Oldman's character is forced to go on television and tell the public the truth about who Harvey Dent was, and it's Bane's final, the final cracking of the structure that's holding Gotham up morally, and everything just disintegrates, and the city turns into chaos. So it's that thing of like once the lie is revealed.
Yes, I'm at that point.
Yeah.
Shit's hit the fan, not looking great. Don't know if, he's going to get the beautiful girl in the end. Probably it's Bridgerton, I'm sure he will. And there'll be lots of kissing and holding her hair and touching her face.
I'm thinking of The Last Temptation of Christ.
Oh, yes.
That film that we've talked about. And James, actually, who we heard a question from earlier, was saying that that episode we did would have been about a year ago in the lead up to Easter.
Yeah, it would have been Easter.
Was useful in a
interesting
conversation in a church context around that movie. So we're glad that was helpful. But in the final act, in which we're watching what could have happened if Jesus didn't follow through with his death, I think it's Peter that he runs into. I think that could be wrong. It's one of the disciples who is explaining how the Jesus movement has exploded and taken off, and Jesus is going, "No, that's me. I didn't die. I didn't resurrect. That's a lie. That didn't happen." And Peter's response is, "Doesn't matter what the truth is. The movement has already taken off."
Oh shit!
And so there's an interesting debate, almost like a thought experiment to be had around this idea of, and it's intentionally provocative. Does it matter if Jesus died and resurrected? If the movement exists regardless?
Wow!
If it's still providing people hope and providing people with a direction for their life, does it matter if it's true or not?
Yeah, it does matter.
Yeah, and that's where, as Christians, we come at that particular debate from a particular angle. But that's another example of what a noble lie could look like a lie that is said with the intent of building up a good thing. And once that one Jenga thing gets slid out, once that lie gets revealed, the whole thing can crumble, which is why it's so precarious.
Yeah.
It's an interesting Interesting thing to ponder. Why don't we've got a couple more questions before we finish off with a couple of other things. Will asks us, we talk a lot about being Christ-like in our communities and churches, yet sometimes seem to focus on some elements of Jesus' ministry more than others. For example, why does Jesus' call to live simply and compassionately often feel left behind, particularly in the materialistic world we often find ourselves in? It's hard. I think that's why.
Well, because if you think about the context where I have church, you know, a house sold there yesterday for $43 million.
Chump change.
Yeah, so now what we're going to do, everybody in Bellevue Hill and Wallara, we're all going to sell your homes and we're going to put into the common purse and we're just going to
Feed the poor.
Feed the poor. I'm thinking we'd have anarchy, brother.
Yeah.
You know, I think it's a part of the broken, fallen world in which we live, right? And we're not going to get. We can try, and we can try about sharing all the assets. We even have trouble in the church sharing our assets with other churches.
Yeah.
Sharing, you know, the disparity between those that have much and those that have little. We have trouble even in the freaking church to share equitably between us all.
Yeah.
Like if we struggle with it, how can we expect the world to get on board? We can't even get our shit together. Or there was a speech. Maybe we should cut that out.
No. I think it's because like the gospel is fundamentally at odds with capitalism. Like they're not compatible. And you can see examples through church history of where people have tried to make them overlap with things like prosperity gospel.
Yes.
But fundamentally, it's particularly late stage capitalism, the place in history we find ourselves now. And I'd recommend a book to people if you're ready to devote a month of your life to a book that will make your mind expand and stretch in ways you didn't think it could, is a book called The Age of Surveillance Capitalism, I think is what it's called, by Shoshana. Name starts with a Z. The surname. I can't remember her last name now. I'm so sorry, but I'll put a link to the book down below. If people want to read more about the way capitalism has become so pervasive into every single facet of modern life, the gospel is at odds with that. It'd be a lot easier for us to take if at some point Jesus also give to the poor, but also make sure that you put some of that into your long-term savings account and some into shares, and make sure that you're developing your own personal wealth along the way, and then you can look after the poor. It doesn't say that.
And I think about the disciples that packed up and then, you know, they just left their businesses and whatever they were doing to follow him. That's just so badass, isn't it? It's incredible examples.
Pretty radical. Yeah.
But then I think we've got people like Lydia, who she was the woman that dealt in fabrics, fine fabrics and dyes. And so she would make these purple fabrics, which were, you know, I'm imagining kings and very fancy people had these beautiful posho fabrics. She would have been making a ton of cash, mate. So she would have been like our fancy entrepreneurs in the eastern suburbs. Definitely. So, because the thing is, when you think about it, she then financed a lot of Jesus' ministry. So we're not going to have benefactors giving money to places like Wayside, Exodus, Wesley. That shit doesn't come from some hole in a wall off a tree. It comes from wealthy benefactors who work their ass off, who are capitalists, who give money willingly to the church.
Yeah. I would say, though, the way that those big companies, whatever they are,
or individual benefactors often.
Yeah, individuals giving money away to places like Wayside or those examples. I would say that is not an act of capitalism, because capitalist mindset is about constant growth without any...
But they're making tons of money. My query is this.
Yeah.
So if they can write a check for $1 million to wayside, that's probably just skimming off the top for them.
Sure, yeah, for a lot of those people, that's probably
and
the case.
They're working in our capitalist society to get where they're getting at the moment. And I just think we need to be grateful for the fact that people are willing to dig deeply to be able to do the work and then to trust the church to use that money well.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that.
Otherwise, how do we fund it?
The money's got to come from somewhere. Yeah. There's an interesting moral debate happening at the moment in the world of cricket, because there's obviously for people that are at all interested in the world of cricket will know that the Indian Premier League is like the central competition that the cricket calendar is more and more revolving around, and it's getting bigger and bigger because that's where all the money is. But there's also a potential deal happening, a little bit similar to golf fans will know what Live Golf is, that there's a huge amount of Saudi money that is primed to pour into the cricket industry and the cricket world that will transform the calendar. And there's this huge debate happening at the moment around, well, A, is that going to help the game? B, should we worry about where that money is coming from? Like, is it actually a moral obligation for us to ask the question, should we be receiving money willingly from a country where it's illegal to be gay or where women's rights are horrendous?
So coming from, say, a rich Saudi prince
or
Emirati
or a massive
prince.
oil company.
Right.
That's a specific example, but it's a lesson in the question of where your stance on capitalism actually then becomes not just a hypothetical thing, but a thing that you actually then have to take action on and put your money where your mouth is, so to speak. So in the church world, is that a question that we have to be asking? Like, where, like, there's a movie called First Reformed, which we've actually spoken about on the show a long time ago, and the character discovers that the big church next door is a benefactor from a massive oil company that's destroying the planet.
Yeah.
And he says, no, I'm not going to stand for that. And I don't know, it just when we're talking about that's another conversation that is an important one to have when we talk about money in the church, is we also have to probably be aware of where that money is coming from. And if we're receiving that money from that benefactor, then we're implicitly taking part in the
so for example,
in that company.
So what if you've got a girl that is has an account on OnlyFans?
Sure.
Where she has sex with strange people, it gets filmed, she makes buckets of money, and what if she happens to be a Christian and this is how she's making money, and then she gives money to the church? Are we to judge what she's doing and saying, oh no, we're not going to accept your offering because you...
Would you accept that money? I don't have a good answer. I think it's a really good question to ask.
Yeah, I'm just trying to put it into like a grassroots kind of example.
It's a great example.
I think I would.
Yeah?
Yeah, definitely would. And I'd shove it straight into counselling and funnel the money into helping people. And I'd walk alongside her. I'd see it as an opportunity to draw close to her, to understand more about her, and help her maybe extricate herself from that and see her value and worth in maybe something else that she could do that wouldn't be so spiritually, emotionally and physically taxing on her body. That probably all sounds very judgy, because I'm thinking these people do that kind of job because they actually like that kind of job.
And the world of, like, not all sex work is the same. Like there's all sorts of different ways that people earn money on OnlyFans, for example. Not all of it is in the traditional, like the when you think of sex work, you think of like sleazy movies from the 19th, like Taxi Driver, Jodie Foster's playing a sex worker, the woman of the night that's out on the street trying to earn a living, sleeping with people. It's a much bigger industry than just that. And so I think it's what you're saying is really, really good in terms of not just immediately judging them for the label, is actually not judging them, but speaking to them as an individual. And
I want to come alongside.
to their circumstance.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, and not passing judgment on someone because of
their gig.
What they do to earn a living.
You know where I'd have trouble is if I had a gangster in the church that maybe was getting money from cocaine or drugs. Yeah. And
trafficking.
And if I had a whiff of that, I think I don't know, I couldn't do that one. I'd have trouble there. I don't know why I draw the line there. I don't know why.
Yeah. It's interesting. And
because it kills people, I think.
Well, yeah, as soon as anyone's life
yeah.
becomes currency. Like that's a pretty clear line that gets drawn there.
Mm.
I'd say the line's well before there somewhere, but like that's a clear black and white for me. You don't trade people's lives as currency. That's not a thing we do.
Yeah.
To go back to the question of like why some of Jesus' teaching gets prioritized over others. I think because some are easier to do than others.
Yeah.
Like I think it's often it's as simple as that. Like it's really easy to talk about some of the more head knowledge stuff about faith, and it's a lot harder to actually take seriously. Like Luke says a bunch of times, you'll be judged.
Yeah.
At the end by how you treat the least of these, by the way that you interact with the people around you, the way that you show grace and love and hospitality to the people that need it. Like the sheep and the goats passage at the end of Luke, I think it is, as well as a handful of others. It's that is a really hard teaching to take on. Whereas some of the nicer stuff, like love people, like I don't know. I'm probably being a little bit too flippant here, but I think
I think
it
you're
is
on
just like some, and it depends culturally as well. Culturally, there are some parts of Jesus' teaching that are easier to do than others.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And I think also we each have passions, and God has shaped us and transformed us in certain ways that we will be passionate about certain things. And so, for example, I'm a passionate evangelist. I just want to, and I feel that that's what I want to do. That's where that's the path that God has me on. And then the other passion is I have for the broken people, mental health issues, abused, domestic violence, that avenue. I'm passionate about that. So I'm just, whereas some people like our Leichhardt buddies are all about justice.
Yeah.
And they have a big political justice drive. And I think, yay, go you. We're over here doing this piece, you go and do that piece. So I think you've got to lean into where God is passionately driving you, because then you'll rock up to work and it doesn't feel very much effort because you're passionately driven to do the work of the kingdom in the ways that God has formed you. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. Yeah, I think that's good. And not framing your thing as the thing.
No, it's a bunch of things.
That's right. Yeah. And that's part of what being the body of Christ is about. It's like collectively we make up the body.
Oh, yeah, and we're all shaped differently.
And we're not comparing what we do to these people and vice versa.
Just different.
It's just different, and they're all good.
How good's that?
Yeah.
So good that we're not a cookie cutter movement. Love that.
As a final question before we start to wrap this thing up, are there any ideas that we believe deeply that still make us feel like theological outsiders? Or to use the language of our friends over at Spiritual Misfits, do you feel like a spiritual misfit? Does that
I don't feel like I fit in anywhere, mate. I feel like I have huge imposter syndrome that I live with daily. And it doesn't seem to get any better. I surprise myself sometimes. I'll open my mouth and a whole string of really informed things will plonk out of my face, and I'll go, I kind of want to tap whoever it is I've just plonked it on, go and say, "Did you just hear that shit? I can't believe I just said that." But no, I feel like an imposter most days, I think. And I just get better at feeling like one.
Yeah.
Feel like I don't fit in. I feel like I don't have many friends. I feel a whole lot of things like that. It's a pretty lonely place.
Yeah.
That's not very cup half full, is it?
Cup isn't always half full though, is it, Ness?
No, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
What do you think?
I feel similar a lot of the time. I think like there are specific theological things that I have come to realize that I'm probably not in the majority. But yeah, I think, I don't know, it's an interesting thing, and I think from what I'm hearing, similar to you, to feel like you don't fit in at work in the broader church thing, but you also don't fit in outside of that. You're kind of in this little middle limbo-y thing.
Yep. That's why we got each other, brother.
It's a strange place because you often end up in one place representing the other, even though you like. I don't want to represent either of those two spheres and camps, and I'm not saying it is or should be a binary, but often it is. It's like you're Christians and you're non-Christians, and often when you're amongst Christians, it's like, oh well, what do non-Christians think? It's like, why are you asking me, and vice versa. That can be a tricky place to be.
I never want to lose touch with how a non-Christian feels. And I think that that's really important so that I can always have a relatable conversation.
Yeah.
Because I remember how when all my friends at that stage became Christians and I wasn't, how on the outside I felt then. And they made me, they weren't kind.
Yeah, I think I've shared this story before, and I'll again, no names, but I remember being struck by this in my last year of high school. A friend of mine, I'm still friends with, had been a Christian his whole life, and we'd gone to the lunchtime Christian group together, and we didn't go to the same church or anything, but like we're friends at school, and we both knew that we were both Christians, and in that kind of like weird post-HSC pre-uni time where you're just like, it's like 2 months of nothing. He went through this process of losing his religious belief and, left his church and
wow.
At the end of it decided, I'm not a Christian anymore. But I remember him telling me a story about he had 3 ride or die really close friends that he went to church with, 2 of which said, sorry, we can't be friends with you anymore.
Because that he was walking away.
Because you're not a Christian anymore. And our friendship is entirely based on our connection to the gospel. And if that's not something that you're committing to anymore, then we're not friends. And they just entirely cut him out of their lives. And I think that's, if our Christian communities are so insular that there doesn't seem to be a way in from anyone, that like the perspective of anyone that's going, oh, I'm curious, wonder what's in there. If the optics is you believe what we believe or we don't talk to you, like that's such an antagonistic stance to have towards the world. And like I often think about the phrase in the world but not of the world.
Yeah.
So often that gets translated into this warped thing of like, well, as Christians, we need to silo off over here so we can do our thing. When that starts with in the world. We're not called to be of the world, but we are called to be in the world. And if we're siloing off and completely cutting ourselves off from people that don't have the same beliefs as us, then how are we going to be in the world and how are we going to take the gospel into the world?
Whereas I've had the flip of that as well, Jonty. I have been a Christian working in the world, and then I became a minister, and then my phone book diminished when I became a minister. It's like, oh, she's now no longer going to be cool at dinner parties. So I just don't get invited to things because I'm not cool anymore. Isn't that weird? Like I don't think I lost my cool when I got my collar. I just got cooler.
Their loss. Yeah. Thanks for all the great questions, everyone.
Yes.
There are a bunch more that we didn't get to. We'll chip away at some more of those.
I hope we did justice to those.
Yeah, and if we answered your question and you were like, you barely even
scratched
you
it.
completely missed the point of my
Give
question.
it to us.
Let us know. Send
Yes,
us
please.
we'd love to continue the conversation. We've got some really exciting things coming up for the rest of this year and into the future of what we're doing here at Filthy Hope. There are two major things that I want to talk about as we wrap up.
Sure.
The first of which we haven't landed on a name for it just yet.
Yeah, getting close.
How much of this can we talk about, Ness? Do you want to tell us a little bit about it?
No, just a smidge. The kids program.
Yes.
So a podcast format for a kids program that's set in a garden in a street that has a library on the fence, and in the library are all the books to the Bible. And this beautiful little puppet girl meets the gardener each day in the garden. And the host of the show, Felicity, she will share a story with Puppet Girl, with the little puppet girl.
Name TBA.
Yeah, that's right. Come up with all sorts of cute little names. Yeah. And they're going to have conversations about life and about Jesus' stories and what would Jesus say and what would Jesus do in the garden together. And other guests are going to come into the garden as well.
Whole slew of different characters.
Yeah, so it's going to be lovely. There's going to be music and dance and song with actions, all of that. And we're going to create a slew of content that the world might love and churches will definitely love for their kids' ministry. Yeah. So I am pretty pumped about that. And that's something in the second quarter of this year we're going to grow into an event. Yeah, so the way I like to describe it to people is sort of people my age and a little bit older will remember who Colin Buchanan is. Oh, yeah. A blend of that with kind of the play school aesthetic. Yes. And it's probably more of the less of a podcast than more I would describe as like a web series maybe. Yeah. Kids TV show. It'll be a similar format to something like Bluey. Yeah. It'll be 7 to 10 minutes tops. Yes. We're probably going to, we're in sort of like, we're developing this at the moment. So we haven't even got to the scripting stage yet, but we're developing it at the moment. We'll most likely kind of be in a seasonal 10 episodes a season type thing. I'm so excited. Yeah, and if you're a listener and you're a church person and you're going, oh, that sounds really cool, I'd love to support that or help make that a thing, get in touch. We'd love to have your support. Or if you've got special gifts and skills absolutely that you think you can add to this, we would love that too. We would love that. We're looking at backgrounds and backdrops and cycloramas and all sorts of sets. Definitely not going to half-ass it. No, it's going to be beautiful. We're going to do the whole thing. And we're going to do live events as well. So we're going to get ready to record, and then we're going to also invite audiences in, kids in to watch. Yep. So it's going to be cool. It's a new thing for us. Because that was something we identified as a bit of a gap. Yeah. In kids ministry. Kids ministry. Yeah. Yeah. So something new that is in development at the moment. Come to me like the little children, Jesus said. That's right. And is there anything else we want to say about that project? No, that's enough. Moment? I think that's kind of it. They'll obviously, like I said, still in development. Doesn't have a title yet. So watch this space. That we'll be updating it as that starts to take form a little bit more. The second one is another podcast, a film podcast. Yes. Which has 2 episodes recorded already. There's a trailer up for it on this podcast feed now, and on the podcast feed where it's going to be releasing. It's called Through a Screen Darkly, which I can explain a little bit more about what that means. This is getting real nerdy. There's a film by Swedish cinema auteur Ingmar Bergman called Through a Glass Darkly, which is as in looking through the mirror. And so Through a Screen Darkly, the concept is that we're looking into the screen, into the cinema screen, but also in the process looking into a mirror and exploring some of the darkness that
cinema can tell us
How
about ourselves and
unreal.
about the world. They'll be short. They'll be 20 minutes to a half hour. At this point, just with the scheduling of it, it's going to be fortnightly.
Fantastic.
Audio only. We'll be doing some guest stuff as well. Episode 1 for that, I think at the moment, is scheduled to come out in the first Monday of May.
Excellent.
There'll be Monday episodes. So we'll be having Through a Screen Darkly on Mondays. The main show is continuing, as always, on Tuesdays.
Into the Word.
Into the Word on Wednesdays. And as this...
We might need to roll the kid thing out on a Thursday. And then that's only going to leave us with maybe our female centric. Should I talk about that? Or not?
We can talk about it. Again, that's probably less further along than the kids show, but there's a concept for it.
Yes.
We've got a name for it.
Yes. Go on.
Are you willing to share?
Go.
Oh, if you've listened this far into the 150th, you get a little treat. We've been developing almost like a Drew Barrymore style talk show called The Sealed Section with Vanessa Jane.
Yes, where we talk about all chick shit.
Yeah.
Everything, whether it be physiological, emotional, spiritual, all of it.
Yeah.
And just unpack all the intimate stuff that you wouldn't ever hear about in church.
Yeah. And we'll be pulling in some phenomenal guests for that as well. I would say we're probably just looking at, if I'm going to estimate, that's probably looking at a 2026
nice
launch, because we've got these other things going on between now and then. But same with the that kids program. If that's something that you feel strongly about, let us know. And if you want to partner with us or back us in any way to make that happen, because we're a small team, you're looking at us with some great support along the way from people like Flick, who's going
to be amazing,
and our church council as well. But if you want to jump on board and help make any of those things happen in all sorts of different ways,
want to come and play with us?
Let us know.
Awesome.
We'd love to chat. 150 episodes, Ness.
Congrats, brother.
Congrats to you as well.
Look at us go.
That's just about exactly 3 years as well. April of 2022 we started. We're in April of 2025.
Wow.
And as we are in Holy Week, I just as well want to encourage people, to listen to Into the Word tomorrow, because we're going into what Holy Week is and through the story that reveals some cool stuff for us in Holy Week and in a way that's different to the normal stories we kind of look at in that week. Whatever Easter looks like for you, whether you're a Christian, whether you're not a Christian, whether you're thinking, maybe I'm a Christian, I don't know. Be curious, I think, is in the same way that you were explaining those kids that you teach are just curious about things.
Just rest in the mystery.
That's right.
Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We will see you next week for another episode of Filthy Hope. But in the meantime, thank you so much for being with us. We really do appreciate all of our listeners that have stuck with us all the way through to 150.
Incredible.
We'll see you at 250, I guess. 300, 500.
Now you're talking.
Happy Easter, happy Holy Week, and we'll see you guys next week.
Yeah,
Thanks,
awesome.
Ness.
This is a prayer for the people who want to give up, who have been hurt beyond repair and cannot bear to see your face in anything. Find peace in letting go on.